All right, guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about armaments, specifically what to do with your armaments once they're in a pretty good place. Okay, so on the screen here, we have my 7 sets of armaments. I have 2 infantry, so 1 for the wedge formation, 1 for the arch formation. I have 2 calves for the wedge formation, and then 2 archers for the wedge formation. And finally, my newest and probably my worst set is actually my set for siege, which is V formation. Okay, so let's actually go over this. So first, we're going to talk about the whole idea that armaments is just luck, right? It's just RNG. And that's not true. It is RNG, but also within the RNG, there's actually ways to optimize, and there's actually ways to stack the odds in your favor. I feel like a lot of times when people just dismiss it as just luck, they're really just not taking responsibility for actually having to think and understanding how the system works to optimize and make the best out of it, right? And I think I'm pretty confident in saying that, just because I've at this point coached enough people on armaments, seen enough people roll and the decision making process that they make, that I know I don't necessarily spend as much as a lot of the other people I see, and my armaments overall are in a better place than theirs, right? And it's just because over time, when you're consistently doing stuff that has higher or better odds, you're going to end up getting more out of it. All right. Next, we're going to talk about what I mean by when I say your armaments are in a quote unquote good place, right? And then the strategy to actually start maximizing, or the next stage once your armaments are generally in a pretty good place. Next, we're going to talk, if you're not comfortable with armaments, I'm going to give you one thing that I think would actually make the biggest difference to help you with your armaments. And then finally, one of the first videos I ever made, I think the second video I ever made, was how I would improve the armament system. I made this in early December. So at this point, about 5.5, almost 6 months ago. And it was one of my worst performing videos. So I'm going to revisit that here, because what I said in there still applies. And, you know, if Lilith can somehow actually get a hold of this, maybe I should contact them. I think it would actually really help improve the armament system. So we'll go over that at the end. All right, so first, let's talk about this whole thing that it's just luck, right? Well, technically poker is just luck. And there's actually professional players that play this game of luck for a living and do really, really well consistently over time, right? So if you have ever watched poker, right, and you can see all the hands of the people that are playing on the screen, they'll actually give a percentage of for each player and their chance of winning that hand. So if you look on the screen right here, this picture, if you're playing a hand against someone else and you have an 86.9% chance of winning, that's really, really good. You're actually going to be willing to go all in and actually bet a lot more, right? If you can consistently be at that kind of advantage and then go all in, over time, you're going to win a lot of money. But for a single hand, 13% of the time, you could probably lose. So is there RNG? Is there luck? Yes. But if you're consistently making the right plays and you're making enough right plays over time, you're going to end up getting a huge advantage over someone who's not doing that. And that's kind of the point I want to make. Okay, so in poker, your starting hand matters a lot. With armaments, the starting inscription and then the stats also matter a lot, right? So if you have a really good inscription to start with, that's something you're going to be willing to invest in. Whereas if the inscription is not that good, even if the stats are good, it's a trap, right? You don't want to actually start investing in it just because the stats are good and then the inscriptions aren't that good. If you had to give me the option between inscription or stats, I would always actually go with the inscriptions first, and I'll go over that a little bit more in depth in the following pages. But inscriptions are actually more important than stats, whereas I would say when I see people are rolling or trying to mess around with armaments, a lot of times they seem to almost value the stats more than the inscriptions. Right, the 135 is signaling how many transmutation stones it takes to roll when you don't lock any stats. When you lock one stat, right, it takes 3 transmutation stones, and then when you lock 2 stats, it takes 5. Right, so basically, to roll once when you're locking 2 stats, you could actually lock none and roll it 5 times. A lot of times, people are either rolling the wrong thing, or they're actually locking the stats too early. Right, if you have something that's like 1.5%, is it really worth locking it? Whereas, you know, if you just reroll that 5 times, chances are you'll probably get a stat that's better for 1/5 of the cost, right? So a lot of the decision making actually goes into when to lock the armaments. And this one I'm not going to get too in depth into, just because there's a lot of different scenarios, right? And we start getting into the weeds. This video could go from a 15-20 minute video all the way up to maybe like an hour plus video. But the whole idea is just that in general, you want to have a good starting hand. If you could have a good inscription and even one stat that's already really high, that's a very good project to work on. And you might not win all the time, but you're much more likely to win than if you don't have that, right? And then ideally, you're locking as little stats as possible until you have to. Usually, by the time you're locking 2 stats, that armament should already be pretty good, where it has a good to decent to good inscription, and at least 2 mid to high stats, right? And then, okay, maybe you're locking 2 stats to get the 3rd stat, but even if you didn't hit it, it's already in a good place. If it's not, you probably didn't do something right, okay? Something that's very valuable or helpful when it comes to calculating stuff for armaments is called the binomial distribution calculator. So if you look that up at Google, you can literally put in, okay, 10 tries, the probability to get a stat is 17%. That's the probability for a scroll and an emblem, right? And if you put that in, it'll actually give you this number, right? And 10 tries, if you have a 17% chance of hitting it, 84.48% of the time, you're going to get it in the 10 tries, right? So if you use the transmutation crystal to reset your 10 rolls, at least feel confident that a little over 5/6 of the time, you're going to end up getting the stat that you're looking for. It might not be the best, but yeah, at least get the stat you're looking for in 10 tries or less. Okay, so you can start doing a lot of cool calculations with that if you are into that kind of stuff, but it's called a binomial distribution calculator, okay? The percentage is actually different for emblem and banner. It's a lot lower. That's why if you notice that in general, your scroll and your instrument is better, in a better place than your emblem than your banner, that's the reason why. So I talked about this a few times. We're gonna actually get a official definition now, right? When are your armaments in a good place? So first, I think you should have 4 good inscriptions. I mentioned this earlier. Inscriptions, if they're a good or decent to good inscription, they're about the equivalent or better than 3.5% of the stat you're looking for. Okay, so I'll just give you an example. So let's just say you got a triple stat, but it's the lowest you could get. All right, so 1.5 of each, attack, defense, and health. You add that together, that's 4.5, right? Let's just say you compare that to a triple stat one where you have 3 of each, attack, defense, and health, right? 3 plus 3 plus 3, that's 9, right? 9 is going to be 4.5% more base stats. The difference there is actually pretty minimal, like 4.5% total stat difference. It's not that much, but the feeling you have between looking at a triple stat 1.5% versus a triple stat 3% seems massive, okay? I would actually make an argument that the difference between a good inscription, so not even a rare or a special inscription, just a good inscription versus a no inscription at all, sometimes that difference could be 4.5%, or if it's not, it's probably slightly less, or sometimes even more, right? So if you're actually looking at a good place to start from, you actually want to start with the inscription first, and then the stats are actually secondary. Not that they're not important, it's just the impact it has on the value of the armament isn't actually as good as the impact the inscription has. Okay, so and just for reference, if you had to ask my opinion what I think elite is, I think the total base stats, or if you count all damage, will have to be over 30%. Right, and then I think you at least have to have 2 special inscriptions, and then at least 4 inscriptions total, and then the 2 other inscriptions are a good place. The reason why you could get more than 4, even though you only have 4 armament slots, is because you could get double inscriptions, right? So theoretically, you can actually have 8 inscriptions on an armament. I've never seen that before, but theoretically, it's possible. Okay, so the picture on here on the screen, this is actually my 2nd archer inscription. So this would actually qualify for the armament being in a good place, right? There's 4 inscriptions there. All 4 of these are relevant. And obviously I have 1 rare inscription. I have all relevant stats, right? So all archer stats, and then the one that doesn't say archer, it's all damage. So that would actually qualify. Now, I wouldn't work on this armament at all anymore, just because there's not much that big of an upgrade, even if I got something. Now, the only time when I would actually upgrade this armament is going to tie into the strategy I'm going to go over next. So once your armaments are in a good place, you're literally just hoarding transmutation stones until you could replace one of the common inscriptions with either a special, ideally, right, or a double or a rare inscription. Now, some rare inscriptions are better than others, right? We're not going to get into that here, but in general, the rare inscriptions are a cut above the common inscriptions. So if you look at the percentages down here, I pulled this straight from Lilith's website, right? Your chances of getting a special inscription is less than 1%. Ideally, you could get it, but you almost can't count on it, right? Because you could pull forever and spend a lot of money and not get one at all. But when you look at the chances of getting a rare and a double inscription, right, 6.55 and 7.1% for the scroll and instrument, that's still uncommon, but you could get it often enough where that should probably be what you should shoot for, right? And obviously for a scroll, if you win, you could get a hunter, so maybe you're not holding out for a rare or double inscription for the scroll. But for the other 3 slots, I think once your armaments are in a good place, what you should look for is just to hoard your transmutation stones, and then you want to get all of your inscriptions from common if they're not like some of the top commons. Like Breaker is really good, Assertive is really good, where you just get flat 2% all damage. Then you're actually holding out for rare or double inscription. And the off chance that you get a special inscription and you invest a lot into a double inscription, then great, it could move into your second armament set for that troop type if you have 5 or 6 marches. Or I don't think you'll be too mad if you ended up getting a special inscription that you had to re-roll, right? So once you get your armaments in a good place, save all your transmutation stones, and you're only going to spend it on a special, rare, or double inscription. Just because if you get another common inscription, even if this inscription is better than the one you have, overall the total value or total performance gain you could get from that armament, in my opinion, just isn't good enough that where it's worth it for you to spend the amount of transmutation stones you probably will have to spend to actually upgrade the armaments. All right, we talked about the one thing, right? That's actually the name of a book, the one thing. And the premise of the book is that to be excellent at something, it's very important for you to actually identify the one thing that you need to hyper focus on and work on, right? So I'm kind of taking that idea, bastardizing it a little bit, changing it. But at this point, I have mentored or coached enough accounts, work with people on their armaments. I've seen it on streams. I work with people on stream. I've seen other people do it on stream, where if I had to pick one thing for people to work on, I'll actually pick something that I had already covered in a previous video, right? So I have seen people with really good armaments that also hoard armaments, okay? But I have never seen someone that is really diligent in cleaning up the armaments and not hoarding that has bad armaments. So let me say that again, okay? I have never seen somebody that actively declutters their bag and, you know, recycle armaments and just try to keep it really lean, that doesn't have good armaments. And I think there's a lot of things that go into that where it forces them to address it daily, you know, to put a little bit more time and effort into it. When your armament bag is decluttered, so basically you don't have like 30 things you have to weigh a decision on, it makes the decision-making process a lot easier, and also it's way less likely you're going to make mistakes. So if there's one thing you want to actually do, and you're not doing this already, declutter your armament bag. I covered this a few times in the videos, but I'll cover this now, right? Let's just say you're going to run 7 marches, and most people aren't. Most likely you're going to run 2 of each troop type, right? 2 archer, 2 inf, 2 cav, and then now there's a siege. Let's just pretend we're not going to mention siege. Your 7th march will either be archer, cav, or infantry, right? So even if you wanted to be super careful and prepare for anything and everything, at most you need 9 armaments of any type, right? So if you open up your banners, you only need 9 because you're actively going to be using 2 of each, and then 1 of either infantry, archer, or cav, and that's it. So if you have more than 9, unless it's for like a specific case where maybe you have one that's a 2% all damage, because you have a 2% all damage, technically it could flex to whatever troop type you want, or something like that, right? Or you have some really good inscriptions that you're saving, you actually usually don't need more than 9, right? Like 9 would be like the leanest you could get it to. That's provided you even want to run 7 marches, okay? So when you start thinking that way, like, hey, I'm going to keep my bag decluttered, I'm going to keep the amount of armaments I'm carrying that I'm not using very lean, your armaments naturally just seem to be in a good place. At least that's what I notice. Okay, and then finally, let's actually go over the second video I ever made. So you can see I made it over 5 months ago now. It's the worst performing video I've ever made. Right now, it only has 133 views. So I know not a lot of people have seen this. At the time, I made the case that to improve the armament system, I would actually make it where when you open an armament, you don't have to select what type it is. Okay, you'll just get stats. So you could get triple siege stats, triple infantry, whatever. And then after you see the stats and then what type of inscription it has, so not even what exactly the inscription is, it's just, hey, did you get an inscription on this? Is it a common one? Is it a rare one? Is it a double one? Is it a special inscription? Then you could declare what armament type you want. With Lilith adding more and more different armament types, right? So from like circle to Tetsudo and all this stuff, right now the system's very clunky because for me, my wedge is in a good place almost all the time. Like almost every time if I open a wedge, I'm not going to get an upgrade, right? But in the off chance that I actually pull a special inscription, and then if I'm trying to open, say, V formation or hollow square or something, or even echelon, so I could upgrade my canyon lineup, and I get a special inscription, I mean, I should be happy. That would actually be really sad because what I really want is for it to be wedge, right? So the way it's set up, where you have to actually pick the armament type, the formation type first, it actually discourages people from branching out and trying different armament types, just because they don't want to miss out if they do pull like a really good inscription, right? Let's just say you could just pull a blank inscription and you get triple siege. Well, good. Now you could declare for V formation because that's automatically useful, right? So I think if you actually adopted, or Lilith adopted this system, it would take away a lot of the pain point for people currently with armaments, and also encourage people to try a lot of different things. And they still have to work on it, right? But to me, it makes it a lot smoother. So hopefully Lilith watches this and takes this idea, where enough people start parenting this idea and get it out there. That's the next iteration of armaments. Because I actually personally don't mind the armament system that much. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that I don't see a lot of ways where it could be improved more, right? But the RNG part, I actually like. Having to use math and figure out what's the best probability and the best play. I feel like I've kind of had an advantage with that, and I do like that. But this whole idea where you have to pick the armament type, and then right now, for the most part, right, you're bound by whatever inscriptions you get, right? Because if there's more ways to get an inscription to inscribe an armament you already have, it would also change the strategy and the decision-making process. But for the most part right now, you can reroll the stats, but the inscription is an inscription. You almost have to get lucky in the inscription. It's actually very limited. Okay, so if you watch all the way to the end, you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the video. Hopefully you got some value out of this. This one, definitely leave some comments. I like discussions about, how we can improve the system, questions about this, because I gave general guidelines, but when it comes to like specific instances with like decision making with armaments, it's a lot more nuanced, which is why it's actually really hard to make a good guide with armaments. Okay, so again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.